Welcome into another episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore, and my co-host, Kyle Jessie, is with us today. And Kyle, it's a different tone this week. It is Bassmaster Classic week. I think the 52nd running of this big tournament. And obviously, we've got a lot of storylines this week. And I actually am not at home. I'm already in Greenville, South Carolina for the Classic. Just checked into the hotel. We're shooting this on Sunday night, February 27th. And this week's going to be a fun one. And I heard you're coming up in just a few days.
Yeah, so I'll be leaving on Tuesday morning. Obviously, get there for some of the registrations and things of that nature. But yeah, like you said, obviously really excited. You're always anxious to get Classic Week underway, and then it finally is here, and you're like, wow, we're doing this thing. So it's here.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's finally here. It kind of we saw the train coming down the tracks, and it's gotten here a little quicker than we thought because we had two Elite Series events, and just a few days after the Elite Series ends, the anglers are already practicing on that Friday. They've finished up their practice by the time we're shooting this podcast, and so Hartwell's about to get going later this weekend. It's a place that we've been to quite a bit. I mean, we've been here in terms of classic venues. It's probably, I haven't looked at the number, but it's got to be one of the most visited classic venues besides Gunnersville, besides maybe like a Logan Martin back in the day that had, the Lay Lakes and stuff, the Coosa River. They had a bunch there. The Louisiana Delta, places like that. They've had 2 to 3 or so. But I think this is the fourth Classic we've had, 2008. It's the fourth Classic in 15 years. So 2008, 2015, 2018, and then 2022. We have had some elite events in there. And Neil Paul with Visit Anderson has done a great job in getting bass tournaments here in general to the Lake Hartwell region. So we've had college events. We've had every single level events. We've had college, nation, high school, opens, and obviously the Elite Series and the Classic, and I think even a kayak event, or there's about to be a kayak event, something like that. But he's hosted every single one of them. If we invent another way of tournament bass fishing, he will have it there. I think he's maybe going to have the team championship. That'd be the only one that he hasn't had. That's probably coming up in the next few years. But Lake Hartwell is great because it always gives us a little different look. People always maybe say it's very similar every time, but we do see something different every time, whether it's baits, regions of the lake, or the anglers that factor. So I'm excited.
Yeah, no doubt. We've talked about this the last couple of shows, but Lake Hartwell is such a good tournament lake. That's not something we came up with. You hear a lot of anglers talk about that. Gives, everybody kind of a chance to do their own thing, their own strength, will come to play at Lake Hartwell. And it's definitely setting up to where, with the weather, water temperature, everything else, that's even more going to be the case. So, it's definitely going to be a good one for sure.
And in this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, we'll break down not only the tournament conditions that we're experiencing, kind of the Classic Week in general for fans who don't get to see the behind-the-scenes aspect of it. We'll also, like I said, break down the water, and we'll have some fantasy fishing picks at the end of the episode for those who love that. And obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, I have it time-coded down in the description based on what topics we're talking about. So don't just skip over us now and get to the goods, but it'll be good throughout the whole time. So, Kyle, though, when we're looking at it, I got word last week that I asked a couple buddies who live around here in Fish Hartwell. I sent them a text and said, hey, what's the water temperature? I don't need to know what the fish are doing. I don't need to know how the weights were last week for the events. I just want to know the water temperature because these guys are going to figure them out based on that. But it really sets the tone for the week. You look at the water temperature and you look at the weather, the air temperatures and the different fronts that come through. I had a couple good buddies who know this place well. They said 55, 56 degree water. Obviously, the dam may be a little bit cooler. The Seneca may be a little warmer, Tougaloo, all that kind of stuff. It might vary, but roughly, if you've seen 55 degree water temperature and it wasn't on a sunny, calm, stagnant day, that is some good water temperatures for the Classic. And it kind of caught me off guard. I expected 48 to 49 degree water temperatures, which doesn't seem like a big difference, but that is definitely winter going into pre-spawn, whereas 55 is. We've kind of left winter and these fish are already in the pre-spawn mode. And so we're having air temperatures range from the mid 30s to around 40 degrees for the lows and then up into the 65, 70 range for the highs. So pretty stable, consistent weather. I will say that today, Sunday night, a cold front is kind of rolled through with all of that rain. So we had a lot of rain today when it was warmer. Now it's cooler this evening. It'll be cool the next few days, but then once we get going for official practice and the tournament, it'll be back to like it was, 40s to 65 to 70, which I don't know the last time in a spring classic that we had 70+ degree temperatures on the final day of a classic, and that's a possibility.
No, yeah, you look at the forecast, and naturally, you just expect if we're holding a tournament, there's going to be rain, torrential downpour, heavy wind, you name it. But like you said, the forecast right now, knock on wood, looks really good. I mean, it looks like it could definitely set up to be a slugfest. And like you said, when you get into that mid 50s, upper 50s, like most parts of the country, when you get into that water temperature, that's when some of the best pre-spawn fishing happens. That's when some of the heaviest bags are caught. Like I said, that's not everywhere because Florida is different. There's places in the country that are far, far different than traditional southeastern lakes. But no, I think that the way it's setting up right now, we may be really, really fortunate come the final day.
And one thing that's also playing in, I mentioned it Sunday rain in the morning throughout the day of practice. And then there's a little bit of a chance every day through Wednesday. Wednesday is the official practice day that these anglers have one more day to go out. So the way the practice is, this is why the Bassmaster Classic, even though it's only 3 days with a abbreviated field, only 55 anglers, this is why the Classic is the hardest tournament in fishing to win, most likely. That's what most people would say, even though elites are 4 days with a bigger field. Opens are huge fields with 3 days. Those are obviously very difficult. I'm not saying they're not hard to win, but there's 0 tournaments out there where you practice Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You have Monday, Tuesday off the water. You're not on the water. You're doing media stuff. You're getting registration prepped. Wednesday, you go out for your practice day. And some guys they don't want to catch a bass. They just want to run around, see what's changed, see their areas. Some guys have to still develop patterns on that final practice day. Then they have Thursday media day, and then Friday we get the tournament started. So it's kind of a segmented. If you found a great pattern on Friday, you are hoping that pattern holds on for an entire week. And rarely this time of year will a pattern last a week with all those water temperature changes. So when I heard 55, I thought shallow. When I saw the rain possibilities in the forecast, it's not like torrential downpours. Sunday was, but just, keeping a little bit of water flowing into this lake. The level's good, but it could dirty up some of the backs of the pockets. If anything, if we do get some warmer afternoons when the rain comes in, that warmer rain could really help some of those shallow anglers. And so I'm looking forward to kind of the spotted bass offshore ditches type guys, forward facing sonar probably involved, versus some of those dirty water. I guess I'm just going to call them dirty water gangsters. The guys who just, that's where they want to be, and they're going to search out for largemouth all day.
Yeah, no, I think that, we've talked about this for months leading up to this. Is naturally when you're talking about a herring lake pre-spawn, you're going to have those spotted bass to catch. Even, for weeks to come, that's still going to be a deal. But, for the largemouth fishing to set up right, at least, from what we've seen in the past, 2018 Classic, the water temperature definitely needs to be where it's at now. If it's much lower than that, I feel like, just my opinion, it seems like a lot of those largemouth do some of the same things, maybe not so herring related, but they're still going to be deeper. You're not going to be able to shallow water power fish for them as much, but the way it's setting up now, it's basically exactly what we have hoped for selfishly. Some of those deep offshore guys probably don't like it nearly as much, but from a fan's perspective, it's going to change it up a lot because you're going to see a lot of different things at play. I mean, it's possible that, in a field of 10 cameras, you're going to have half of the field doing one thing and half of the field doing the other, which, you guys talk about it on Bassmaster Live all the time. Any tournament or tournament lake where there's some diversity, you can do different things, is always fun to watch. I mean, it's what makes a lot of tournaments so special, and definitely makes me happy because it seems like that's what we're about to see on Lake Hartwell.
Yeah, and these guys just got done with their 3 days of practice, so who knows what'll change and how it'll develop. But instead of talking to one of the Elite Series pros and Classic qualifiers that is going to compete this week, I wanted to get a different perspective, someone who's going to be watching the Classic, but knows quite a bit about Lake Hartwell. So I'm not going to keep him waiting any longer, but I'm going to bring in Jayme Rampey. He's a South Carolina stud. He's won so much on the Savannah River at various levels, whether it's weekend local tournaments, regional tournaments, and he's made quite a living in his home state. So I'm going to bring in Jayme Rampey to the call. So I wanted to welcome in Jayme Rampey to the show today. Kyle, obviously, this might be y'all's first introduction. I know I've pestered Jayme a little bit because he was doing very well in the Open in 2020. We mentioned that in the fall, I believe, coming in second for that Open. But you can see, look at the hardware behind him. He's got plenty of wins, and a lot of them have came on Hartwell. So, Jayme, how are you, man?
Good, guys. How are y'all?
We're doing well, and we wanted to get your opinion. You know, we could talk to some of the classic competitors, and they could be vague about what they're doing or what they maybe discovered, but you know Lake Hartwell very well. You've won quite a few tournaments there, and some have been a couple weeks earlier than what our classic is this week, and some have been a couple weeks later, and then also in the fall. So for Lake Hartwell, this time of the year, the conditions that were given, you know, the water, it's seemingly, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but the water seemingly, the level is up to close to full pool if it's not full pool, and the water temperature, you know, is in that mid 50s.
It is. And with the water coming up like it has, it's going to scatter the fish out some. This is setting up to be one of the tournaments where they're going to catch them, and everybody's going to catch them. I'm thinking, I was out there a couple weeks ago and I seen some things. Fish are already starting to stage up real hard. I wouldn't be surprised, man, if on Friday or Saturday, some of these guys are looking at them.
Really? You think it could jump up from being a winter transition into pre-spawn into, we get a couple 70-degree sunny days, and they could be.
I've already seen water. Last week I seen water in the 60s up one of the arms of the rivers. So typically when you start getting that 58, 59, this happened a couple years ago in the FLW tour. It's probably been about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It was the same way. The water was real cold. We had 2 weeks of warm weather, and they shot up on the bed. I think it might have been the same week as this tournament.
I think John Cox, did he win that one? Was that the one John Cox won?
He wanted looking at them, and in a little place up a little bay up the river. So I really don't think the deep fish in this tournament's going to play that much. I may be wrong, and some guys may pound them, but you know, I think early in the morning, some guys are going to do the herring deal. They're going to catch them deep, jerking, you know, blade runners, spoons, drop shots, stuff like that. But I think when it's all said and done, who wins is going to have all largemouth, and they're probably going to come 7, 8 foot or less, I would say.
I would say that definitely has me super excited, because that's what we were just talking about, is hoping that would be a major possibility in this tournament. So for somebody that has not seen Lake Hartwell, kind of explain some of the cover you would expect to do well. Obviously, back in 2018, we saw Jason Christie fish, you know, some of the dog fennel, some of the shallower docks, some of the backs of pockets. Try to kind of explain to somebody that maybe hasn't seen Lake Hartwell some of those shallow areas that might play for largemouth.
There's not a lot of dog fennel left now. When he was here, there was a lot. The lake had been low, it had flooded, and it had been like that 2 or 3 years. There's not much of that now. I'd say your primary structure now is going to be those flat docks, your pockets going in, and then man-made brush piles, crappy brush piles. That's the things they're going to stage on right now. That's going to be your 2 primary targets right now.
So you mentioned the deep fish, not maybe playing as we get into the tournament. These guys just got done with their 3 unofficial days of practice, and they'll have one more day to look at the lake on Wednesday. We'll have a cold front, you know, passing through the next few days, but it shouldn't be too drastic to knock them back at all. But when it comes to the sections of the lake, you know, that Green Pond region, that's just above mid-lake for most people's opinion. You know, you've got the Tougaloo to the west, you've got the Seneca right there if you go north, and then you have the dam at the bottom. Are the fish at the dam, I mean, in dramatically different stage than those fish up the river that could be, you know, making beds over the next few days or possibly by Championship Sunday? I mean, are the fish down at the bottom going to be in 20, 25 feet of water, or is that going to happen pretty quick and they transition there as well?
Usually the lake starts up the rivers and then it works its way down to the dam. The dam's usually a week and a half to 2 weeks behind the upper parts of the lake. It usually goes upper part, then it'll go the Green Pond area, you know, up the Tougaloo and the Seneca, the 6 and 20 side. And then it'll just gradually work its way down to the dam. I would say Green Pond and the dam right now, I haven't been out there this week, but I would say the water temperature is probably 3 degrees difference right now. And if you go up the Tougaloo, the Seneca arm, I would say the water's probably 7, 8, and you could find 10, 12, 15 degree water difference just depending on how far you go up.
Now, Jamie, let me ask you this. Obviously, kind of talking about the dam, you having fished this lake for so long, kind of talk to us about the difference in fishing for these blue herring fish with forward-facing sonar versus back when there was no forward-facing sonar. Has that made them, I imagine, easier to catch to start with, but have you noticed those fish becoming more difficult to catch now that everybody can target them so much easier, if that makes sense?
It is, and it really makes it frustrating. You really find out how bad of a fisherman you are now when you have forward-facing sonar, because you see all these fish out there and, you can't get, 30% of them to bite. But yeah, it has made a difference. I have seen some of the fish actually shy away from it now, like some ditches and stuff that we used to catch them in. You'll pull in now and you'll turn everything on and you'll see them swimming away from you versus being stationary. So they know what's up. They've got enough of it on their heads now that they have seen it. But I have noticed something as well with herring, is those herring will kind of gravitate to that sonar for whatever.
Curious,
reason.
yeah.
Yeah, there's something going on with the forward facing that they like. They will stay in that 50 to 60 foot cone that you can see. They'll stay in that. And the herring fishing, the thing about it is this time of year is a guy that finds them stacked up somewhere in one of those short ditches or short timber place. He could catch 20 pounds in 15 minutes. And it can happen. And somebody's going to do that. Somebody's going to pound them early in that 18 to 25 foot of water. And, they may go there the next day and there not be a bass there, or they could find them Wednesday and go back Thursday and then not be there. It's just, these herring are so unpredictable, being a local, like I have maybe 15 or 20 places that I run in a tournament in the morning, and I may get 3 places to fire up. So it's real difficult to know. It's just a big timing deal, but it's definitely there, and it definitely can happen for sure.
You mentioned the guy that maybe at the end of the tournament, 3 days, 15 bass, that they're going to be all largemouth to win this event. But that doesn't mean that the spotted bass are just dwarfed compared to them. It's just, it's getting to the time of year where those shallow largemouth could shine. I've heard, and I've got a lot of buddies that live around here that say that Hartwell is very healthy, that the spotted bass, you can have any given weekend 17 to 19 pounds of spotted bass that are competing head to head with 17 to 19 pounds of largemouth. And that doesn't just mean that they're fishing deep at the dam or off points way off. All those ditch fish, with the weapon bite in the morning, that could be all spotted bass and is at times. There are a largemouth that gather up. So it'll be hard. I guess we'll have to interview them and really tell, because the spotted bass guys early in the event may not just be fishing deep. They may have gotten on a good bag in the morning and not culled them out later.
That's right. The spots will be super consistent. Hartwell's not linear with spots, though. It's not. If you catch a 15 to 16 pound bag of all spots, that's a really good bag. In the last several weeks, the lake has been pumping out phenomenal weight. Like, it's just been pumping out, like 15 pounds might be 16th, 17th place. And that's really good for Hartwell. Typically this time of year, that's, way up there. Some guys, I've seen some 23, 24, 25 pound bags this winter and coming into this early spring. Now, I don't think the weights will be that high because they're starting to scatter. They're starting to go to the bank. They're starting to stage up on the brush and the docks and all that stuff. So your big concentrations of fish that were on these little corners and, sitting in these ditches or whatever they were on, they're starting to kind of filter out. They're starting to slide up. They're starting to think about, doing their thing. And, I was out there last week. Me and my son we went on a Friday. He was out of school, and it was it was phenomenal. Till 12 o'clock, it was just, you couldn't do no wrong. So, I told a buddy of mine then that it was going to be, we got that warm trend like we're about to get, because after today, we're 65 to 78 degrees all the way through the tournament. And when you're already playing with that 53 to 55 degree water at the dam, and you're playing with 57, 58 at Green Pond, so you're starting to,
it can happen quick.
It's going to happen. Now, they may not be laid up everywhere looking at them, but people will see some fish they catch, whether it be on the bed, whether it be swimming down the bank, whether it be sitting under a dock, they will see some fish with their eyes that they catch and weigh in this tournament.
That is super exciting for us to hear. I know that for sure. Give us some bait predictions. Obviously, the baits that we see play typically with herring fish, pretty consistent. But give us some of your ideas of some of the baits that'll play, and then maybe what bait you think will win the Bassmaster Classic this year.
I say your top. I'd say if in every pro's boat this week, you're gonna see a jerkbait. You're gonna see a Blade Runner type bait underspin. You're gonna see a Kitech. You're probably gonna see a football jig, and then pretty much everybody's gonna go shallow. It's gonna have some sort of Zoom slinky or some kind of stick bait type thing on. Some of your river guys, that spinnerbait and chatterbait bite in that dirty water this time of year can be really, really good too. So it's going to be awesome to watch it play out, because some of these guys that are coming here are just phenomenal at that dirty water. And we got a big rain this weekend, and I know these rivers have got dirty, and it's just, that water's going to get warm, and by the tournament it's probably going to be good stain. So I don't know, man, that'd be so hard to say. If I had to say what it'll consist in, I would say it'll be one on some sort of stick bait or some sort of small swim bait, one of the two.
And do you expect to see maybe some of those fish in the ditches? Will we see physical busting, and these guys just like, they hear it and they throw their rods down and they try to get over to actual visibly schooling fish? Or will most of the schooling that we see this week happen below the surface that they capitalize on with those swim baits and jerk baits and stuff?
Man, with the water the way it's going, they could pull in a pocket or a little small ditch, and 20 pounds schools up in front of them and they catch it. It's, when you're fishing a herring lake, I've had guys make fun of me when we're in Florida fishing. All these fish are jumping and I'm spinning around looking everywhere, but they don't do it down there like they do here. But you always got to keep your head on a swivel up here. You always need a top water or some sort of something you can bomb out there, because they will. You don't know. I've won tournaments in 6 inches of water with them, with a pot of bait the size of your boat, and they're got them in the back of a ditch, and they're just eating them as hard as they can eat them for, until they eat them all. That's what they do. They just stay back there and eat everything that's there, and then they'll leave and find another group of herring and push them up. I think you may see both. I really would. It's the weather that we had is just crazy. The weather that we had off that cold weather, and we had some warm weather a couple weeks ago, that kind of gave them a little start. And then I think now with this weather this week, this is what dreams are made of. If you know what you're doing, man, I'm excited to see it. It's going to be great.
Well, I don't want to be pessimistic here, because we just came off 2 Elite Series events that were great in Florida, but Florida's a different animal. I get it. We set the tone with expectations, and Florida changes it up. But we thought 100 pounds was going to happen at the Harris Chain, and 77 wins that event. So what is the one thing or the two things that could hurt this classic and make it not be so wide open? What in your opinion, if everything is lining up to be great, the anglers are adjusting, they know how to fish something like this, and their skill set, proves it to be as well. But is it weather? Like, what is the one or two things that could really
I think the only thing that's gonna kill it is if the fish, it has got warm so fast and their bellies are hurting and they're just kind of laying around, lethargic, don't want to bite, don't want to move. There's a week that happens here. I've seen them laid up, and you'll pull in some pockets and you'll just see them sitting in the middle of the pocket. They may be, 10 or 12 4-pounders sunning, sitting up in the middle of the pocket on nothing.
Yeah.
You cannot get them to bite. You know, they're I call it their bellies hurting. You know, they're just in that mood. You know, they come out of deep water or whatever, and they're just kind of hanging around, adjusting to what's coming. And that would be the only thing I would see that could hurt it. I'm thinking it's gonna. I don't think it will, though. I think there's enough fish that have already made a move, that are up there kind of hanging around. It's not going to be tough. It's not going to be one of these that guys are like, oh, it's tough. It's not one of those tournaments. It may be when it's tough to catch a 4-pounder, but it's not going to be tough to catch fish.
So if they say that at Tuesday registration or Thursday for media day, Kyle, stop them in their tracks, because they're not allowed to say that. But Kyle, if you don't mind me, I'm going to keep on a roll here for just a second. The guys like Brandon Cobb, Shane LeHue, you know, Patrick Walters, Brian New, even a Hank Cherry, Matt Airy, all the Carolinians that have fished here a bunch, even the guys like Jason Christie and John Cox that know this place pretty well this time of the year, do they have a bigger advantage this time of year, even though it's about to be wide open and fish will be biting a lot of ways and a lot of places? Does having history help, knowing where they're going to move, or do you think it could hurt them because they're going to be trying to go from this ditch to that ditch and history starts messing with them?
I think Brandon will be dangerous. Brandon's going to be dangerous in this one. If I had to put money on somebody, that would be who it would be. I've fished with Brandon a long time, and that's because history, they do the same thing in the same places every year, year after year after year. So, you know, the more times you've been out here, the more places you know, the more brush piles you know, the more docks, the more, you know, and they're creatures of habit. You know, you may have this one dock or one brush pile that's 15 miles the other direction, but you know that there's going to be a 3 to 5 pound bass on that dock. It's just a matter of whether you can catch them or not, or a brush pile or whatever it may be. You know, that's really I think that'll really, really help the guys that are familiar with the lake. They know which pockets they spawn in first, you know, all that things. I really do think that'll help, because it's a big lake, man. You can be in the wrong area and you know, come to weigh in, you're like, hey guys, where were y'all at? You know?
Yeah, I caught 13 pounds, but I caught 150 bass today, and I'm down the standings. But yeah,
that's right. And I don't think it's going to be some giant weight tournament. I don't think you're going to see
over 50 though, right? You think over 50? Over 50, 55?
I think 17, 18 a day would definitely do it. I think you're probably going to have a couple over 20s. The biggest thing that I think would be is like a Jason Christie going up the river and finding that chatterbait bite. Like he did that, you know, he did that one year. He found that chatterbait bite and it went away on him.
Yeah.
And what it did was those fish went from being back there feeding to I'm going on the bed. And then they started doing that weird thing like I'm talking about, and that's where who won that? Was Jordan?
Jordan won that, and he won it on like he caught it like on 5 different baits. He had the ditch deal between the islands, and then he ended up catching some big ones on a wacky worm at the end of the tournament.
That's right, and a guy that can mix the fish in the mornings are just more of a confidence booster. You know, they get you 12 to 13, 14 pounds, and you know you can probably keep 2 of those fish, 3 of those fish. You know, and you're going to probably have a couple 3-pounders, and they're always out there. The spots are going to bite every morning, every afternoon. That's why a lot of people target them. They're going to bite. You know, they're just not going to be those big, fat, you know, healthy largemouth.
Long bullets.
Yeah, there's not many 5-pound spots in Hartwell. I mean, I've caught very few. I might have caught 5 since I've been out here. There's a lot of 3.5-pound spots. You know, so you can kind of use that, but there's a lot of 5-pound largemouth. I mean, a lot more than people give it credit for. I think one year Todd Alton in a FLW tour, he caught them really good on the same type thing Christie did, and I think it did the same thing. I think it kind of went, once again, it got warm. The fish left that deal and they went straight up. They left that end of the dock or whatever he was doing. and they got up there and they
to
got
the walkways and yeah.
Yep. Then they got up in that mood again. And when they get in that mood, I mean, it's frustrating. I mean, I've seen it. It's very, very frustrating. And you'll have guys, I'm sure there'll be guys on live that are going to be like, look at that one, this one won't bite, and then, there's going to be one guy like, look at that one. He's going to throw his worm over there and it's going to eat it. And then he's going to have a great day.
Exactly.
He's going to have a great day. But you'll see a lot of fast and furious. Like I would say the first morning, those guys will pound them first thing in the morning. They'll go to their ditches. They'll go to their, they'll go to their schooling fish. And I mean, bass track will be lighting up like this. I mean, you won't even be able to keep up with it, and that's
that's my only concern for Brandon Cobb is that Fast and the Furious or running around and he's won an elite event here, but having 52 boats at day one at takeoff follow you to your first spot. That's the one thing that's like, maybe he has to put down farther in the creek and now they're schooling and he's not to where he needs to be. He's got to leave to get it. He's got to go through the crowd. We saw Christy like that at Grandin, and that's just an X factor you cannot practice for. You don't know that that's going to happen. You hope that people follow you because you're going to be in the running, but day one, I mean, I remember the story Chris Jones told me. He just got third in the Classic last year at Ray Roberts. But Chris Jones' first Classic was at Gunnersville in 2014. He had a boat wrap very similar to KVD's. He goes to his first spot and comes off pad, and there's 40 boats following him, and they followed the boat. Messed his whole day one up. He was like, what is going on? And it's because they picked the wrong boat to follow. And I know that people are going to know Brandon, and they're going to follow him. So that's my only concern with him. But the only other concern, Kyle, is maybe Hank Cherry taking some of that flotilla away because he's not far from down here.
That's right. And Hank, and I don't know Hank real well. I've talked to him here and there, and I've seen how he fishes, but his style and he's very, very good with the jerkbait. He could be dangerous in it as well. I mean, that pause, that's enough to make those lethargic, belly hurting fish want to bite. It's.
He's really shown his skill with a bladed jig as well recently as well. So that's the one X factor as well, as if it does start to leave that bite. And we saw that, Kyle. You were out there at Ray Roberts last year when you're not supposed to throw that stuff. He was catching them on it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the thing is there's so many storylines with this tournament, but like you mentioned with Hank Cherry, you feel like, I don't want to say luck running out because it's not luck whatsoever, but it seems like the odds of making a three-peat just doesn't seem all that great. And then you look at this tournament and it seems to set up for him in basically every aspect. So, like you said, I think it's has a far better chance than most people want to give it credit for.
Do you think, Jamie, that Hank has a great shot to a three-peat? You know what I'm saying? Like the odds.
Oh,
like is he? I mean,
if he finds a jerkbait deal in the mornings, and I mean he's a pretty good sight fisherman as well. I mean, and all these guys are good. It's not like we're talking about whoever. We're talking about guys that know the deal, know when to quit, when to make that adjustment. Yeah, of course, he definitely could. And the thing about Hartwell, man, is you could literally win it and stay 150 yards around Green Pond. Or you could run 35 miles up the river. It's so hard to say. I'm just going by history. Somebody may find something crazy up a river and just dominate this tournament. And I'm like, wow, I wish I'd have known that a long time ago, but it's hard to beat those consistent herring fish in the mornings, your fish that are pulling up with the sun. And I was looking at the weather earlier because my son plays baseball. We were looking at practice for this week. It's supposed to be 80 degrees on Thursday.
And that's still an off day, which is great. Yeah, it's a prep for day one.
80 degrees. It's going to be, I'm telling you, this is the exact same thing that happened in the tour, however many years ago it was. Same thing. I fished that term. And I was catching them. I told Brandon, I thought I was going to win that tournament. I had them so good deep. I had 3 places that, I mean, literally I could call 17, 18 pounds, 30 minutes in any of them, any day I wanted to go to them. It got warm the week we were off limits, or the 2 weeks we were off limits. And we went out there the morning of practice. I checked them. They were still kind of there, kind of acting okay. Dude, tournament gone, vanished. Went up to the bank and they were swimming everywhere. Now they wasn't really on the bed that good, but they were just everywhere. They freaked out. They're like, hey, it's spring, man. Let's go.
Last thing before we let you go, Jamie, because this has been great. We'll probably go all night long if we were just telling fishing stories about Lake Hartwell because we're so juiced for the Classic. But what do you think the big bass of the tournament's going to be? Do you think we could see a 6.5, 7 pound largemouth?
Oh yeah, I'd say you're probably going to be a 7 pound, 7 something will be what you'll see probably for big fish.
Do you think we could see an angler catch 20 pounds of just spotted bass? Could that be something we see as well?
It could happen. It could, but I don't think so.
Okay.
But it could. It definitely could.
Another factor we're going to have to keep an eye on with this this weather. If it gets that warm, we might be fending off wakeboard boats and jet skis by the end of this weekend.
They will come out. They will come out on. You're a little early. Most of them are not here for the summer yet, so
yeah, they're both still winterized.
It's gonna be great to see because, like I say, you're so on that edge of wanting to go there and wanting to be deep. The guy that can play with them both ways and stay with the deep fish and then go to the bank in the afternoons. That's the guy that I think will win the Classic. Whoever can stay with those fish all day long.
And this is why I love Lake Hartwell. We mentioned it at the top of the show. 4 times in the last 15 years we've had the Classic. So people are like, I know what's going to happen in Lake Hartwell. But 2008, the lake was 30-something feet low, and you could see every single tree back when when Noah's Ark was around here, that the trees were still there. You could see all those. 2015, it was the coldest Classic on record with boats frozen on day one to the trailer. We had a little bit of a delay there. And then 2018, it was that transition where it was a cooler practice and it was a cooler week before, and it got warmer every day of the tournament. And we saw a guy like Jason Christie who had them dialed in that they just on the final day he couldn't get one more keeper. And we saw a guy like Jordan Lee who fishes free just all the time, it seems, was just like, I'll just go throw a wacky worm up here on the dock, and he catches 2 biggest fish of the tournament to win.
That's what you're going to say.
Yeah,
that's the guy that fishes free, doesn't get hung up on what he's doing, doesn't get hung up on a certain thing, that can make that 1 or 2 adjustments. I don't think it'll be a bunch of adjustments. I don't think you're going to have to freak out and run 40 miles or nothing. But I think just sliding up a little closer or staying off a little bit or putting sunglasses on, I would be shocked if somebody is not catching them spawning this week. I would.
That's awesome.
I would be super shocked just what I've seen in the last couple of weeks. I may be wrong. They may not be up there. They may be still staging real hard, but I think there will be some bass waiting and looking at them this week.
If we haven't seen it by the time Bassmaster Live is wrapping up on Sunday, and there's an angler, maybe his feet is a little frozen, or he's just standing there fishing a dock slowly, I'll say that he's sight fishing just so we can get it in there. But
well, he will be sight fishing. He may just not be fishing for a spawning fish.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we'll see a lot of sight fishing when it comes to electronics as well. But Jamie, maybe this is the Classic that Gerald Swindle can win. He's been, honestly, his record in the Classic has been terrible since we've moved it to the spring, but his best finish was a top 10 in 2018 here at Hartwell. It's kind of transitioning into his game. So we will see if your Zoom teammate gets it done this week. But
man, like I say, yeah, man, I appreciate it. Like I say, it could be anybody's ball game. It's going to be exciting to see. It's hard to put it on one guy. And I'm telling you, there's so many good fishermen in this thing. And I know guys have already figured out something, but the guy that makes that adjustment and has the deep and the shallow deal going is the guy that's going to be really dangerous this week.
Will they be able to, will fans who listen to this podcast and show up to the expo and want to pick your brain about Hartwell or get your reaction on what's happened, if it's different from your prediction, are you going to be at the expo this week to be able to talk to them, give them a shout?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be on there on Friday. I'll be at the Buck and Bass booth on Friday.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, I appreciate you joining me and Kyle here for this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. This will be going up very, very shortly, and we'll be able to see the whole Classic play out. I know you'd love to be in the Classic, but it's got to be cool to see a Classic go down close to home, a place that you have confidence in, and you're like, oh, he figured it out, and you have the utmost prediction abilities going into the final day of who are super.
I would like to see. I mean, personally, I would like to see somebody come off the wall and just totally make me look silly. I'd like to see somebody find something that's just nuts, and just catch 25 pounds a day, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I've been fishing here 20 years and I haven't seen a lot of different things happen, but these guys are good and they're from all over the country and all over the world. So, I'm sure somebody's got something. Somebody can't sleep at night already, I promise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jayme, we appreciate you joining us. I'm just going to dub you the Savannah River Stud with how many wins you have on this chain or this river system of lakes. So appreciate you joining us. Kyle, did you hear everything you wanted to hear in that episode? I mean, that interview? I think that the outlook's pretty good.
I did. That was fantastic. That was some super, super insight from, like you said, one of the most knowledgeable anglers of that entire region. So definitely gave me a way better idea of what we may see, and definitely super excited to hear some of the things he said. For sure,
it'll be one of those that all the guys watching live, there's gonna be a lot of guys get in trouble with their bosses on Thursday and Friday because they're not gonna be able to put the phone down. Because if you put your phone down, it's gonna change so fast, and you're just gonna be like, oh gosh, he just had nothing, now he's got 18. How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. By the time the fans are watching live in the expo and they go to walk across to Bon Secours Wellness Arena for the weigh-in, it would have changed from the last flight of guys checking in. So awesome, Jayme. Appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to Hartwell this week, man.
Yeah, man. Hope to see you guys around.
Awesome. That's Jayme Rampey, local stud here at Lake Hartwell. And Kyle, we're going to get into the fantasy fishing picks very shortly.
So you guys.
See ya.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Jayme. Yeah, I'm definitely anxious a little more so than I was before with my fantasy fishing picks. I'm not going to pick them or not going to change them. I never do. It just gave me flashbacks of last year's classic because I went all deep water, ledge fishing type guys, and it ended up being one shallow and being dominated shallow. So all my fantasy picks, I think, can go both ways as far as shallow or deep. But yeah, my fantasy column that'll be going up here in the next day or two, that's actually the premise of what it was, shallow, deep, or both. I mean, it's going to be, what Jayme just said, it could easily be a mixture, but the fact that he mentioned that fish will be getting on beds by the end of the tournament is even far beyond what we expected. So it will be super, super interesting to see.
That is very crazy that he thinks that could be a possibility. And I'm going to trust him on that because I have seen it where those fish, blueback herring lakes, they just do things you don't expect them to do. The spotted bass group up, in the dead of winter in a shallow pocket when that's not textbook for normal, fish that target threadfin. And then you've got, all the largemouth that behave differently too. But you got to think, when there's a big blueback herring population, obviously these largemouth will eat blueback herring if they luck up on some. But a lot of these largemouth, they'll deal in shad, but they are bluegill hunters. They are going to live predominantly shallow when we get to this time of year. And first week of March, I feel like we're always wanting to sight fish as soon as it hits March. But in Arkansas, at least, we know there ain't a wave of fish on the bed in March. It's always like the first week of April or second week of April, even if the weather seems right, like the fish don't transition as quickly from deep to shallow there. But with blueback herring, these fish feed upwards. They live shallower. They do go out deeper as well, but they move. They're never like, I'm out deep all day. They're out deep in the afternoon and they're up shallow in the ditches in the morning. Even if they're at the bottom of the ditch, it's still, they're in a creek not far from the bank. And so it's a different kind of deal at these blueback herring lakes, even for largemouth. And so I'm very excited about that. I just wonder if those shallow places that dirty up and get warm quick, if they clean up enough for those ultra shallow guys to be able to see them. I guarantee you the ones who want to power fish, they don't care. They don't want it to clear up. They want to be able to power fish with a spinnerbait, bladed jig, swim jig, all that stuff. I will say there's an Elite Series angler who blurred out his bait on Instagram after catching a spotted bass, and I could see the bait through the blur because we've all trained ourselves to do it. So I saw what he was throwing, and it was a swim jig, and so it's like even the spotted bass will get shallow enough to catch them on baits like that.
Yeah, and to make one thing clear, some people probably hear that, Jayme talking about some of the fish even possibly being on beds and think that's crazy, that's absurd, that's not going to happen. Like you said, it's certainly possible. Like he mentioned, it's obviously not going to be the only deal. I don't think it's going to be a matter of everybody sitting there looking at them, but that's not unheard of. I mean, a lot of lakes in the Southeast, I don't think I'm going by myself and saying this. Some of the biggest fish in the lake will pull up first. That first wave of fish that come up, some of the biggest fish in the lake will be there. And like you said, it might not be the biggest wave of fish, but they'll, whenever it gets right. I mean, some of those fish, they don't want to wait. And whenever everything starts getting right, the days get longer, the water temperature warms. I mean, some of those fish are going to get up there, whether, like he said, whether or not you're seeing them or not. I'm sure there will be fish that are technically spawning that get caught.
Yeah, that's the one thing. And when I'm setting up my fantasy team, I've kind of set it up that way as well. I've got that shallow or deep or both, because like he mentioned, these are 55 of the best anglers in the world. They know how to catch them shallow. They wouldn't have been able to qualify. Half the guys qualified catching them shallow last year, and even opens winners. But who's got that trick up their sleeve? Who's confident with changing on a whim? That's the biggest thing I feel for a classic champion. The classic is the hardest event to win, not because of skill, but because of your ability to adapt and adjust. We saw it, Hank Cherry catching them on a riprap at Gunnersville with a jerk bait. He would roll over to a dock or that grass patch, catch him on a bladed jig, catch him on a jig, a normal flipping jig. Did that. Ray Roberts, we see it, flipping bushes with a heavy cover swim jig that he's designed, also throwing a bladed jig. Then he goes and catches a couple keepers that he needs on a jerk bait. We know that. And then even adapting on the final day when it got as tough as it did, catching them flipping a Texas rig into that instead of flipping the swim jig. So I think it's the adaptability portion of it. The last time we were here, like we mentioned, jerk bait, small swim bait, that was a factor for Jordan Lee the first couple of days. Then we see him throwing a wacky worm and fishing up shallow and catching fish on it. So it's going to be, and we saw Jason Christie not adapt, not adjust, and needed one more bass. And Lake Hartwell, it's one of those things, if you gave me 20 minutes on any lake in the country to go catch a fish, other than maybe Mr. P's private pond in Arkansas, Hartwell's going to be up there on, I can go catch one in 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of people agree with this, but the tournaments that are most entertaining to watch are the ones where guys have to fish and adapt and do different things. It's not the most entertaining always to watch somebody do the same thing for 3 days straight on the same spot. I mean, that's great, and that still takes all the skill in the world to find and be able to make that last for 3 or 4 days. But no, I think when it comes to it, like you saw in that 2018 Classic, I mean, just fishing and adapting with the weather and with the changes, is everything. So I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, I think there'll be a lot of shifts, a lot of changes, people making the right moves. Some people make the wrong moves. But yeah, I can remember I was a senior in college during that Classic, and I can remember as a wacky worm fisherman myself, I couldn't help but think the entire time, Jason Christie, just pick up a worm of some sort, catch that last keeper, please do it. And it just didn't happen. And I mean, he's he owns it.
He
talked. Yeah, I was gonna say he's talked about it a thousand times since. He didn't want to write off not trying to win, and he did exactly what he wanted to do and what he thought he needed to do to win. So, I mean, who the heck am I to question Jason Christie? I would literally never. But I can just remember watching that as it was happening, thinking, "Oh my gosh, if he just catch a keeper." But I think that same scenario will happen this week, where you have to make changes because things are going to go away and things are going to shift and change.
Yeah, and speaking of when you were talking about those guys who are going to do really well and those guys who are not going to do really well, it's a great segue into our fantasy picks, because I know with the way that this tournament's going to set up, some of my picks are going to do great, and some of them, they're going to be in the expo on Sunday. So let's get into our picks real quick. We had a great interview with Jayme Rampey. If you're just joining the show, so if you want to listen to a South Carolina stud, a guy who knows a lot about Lake Hartwell and has his predictions for the Classic, kind of rewind this or jump back in the video once it posts completely. But give me your fantasy picks. We're going to go Rapala style, our 5-man team first, and I'll explain the Drain the Lake. I've kind of set my Drain the Lake team. Me, Tommy Sanders, and Mike Sukon all set our fantasy lineups for the year for Drain the Lake ahead of time. Not in the system, but we wrote them all down. And so I've got to stick with them for the most part. Online, I could probably switch them up, but I'm going to stick with them. and see how they fare. So we'll go with Rapala first, though, our 5-man team. And I'm going to go ahead and start it off, though, Kyle, with Jason Christie in bucket A, 14%. We have made a lot of people mad with our bucket A arrangement because we have stacked it, and we did handpick the lineup because we have to change gears from the Elite Series to the Classic. So we've stacked it. They got Hank Cherry in that bucket, Brandon Cobb, Seth Fighter, Greg Hackney, Jason Christie, like I mentioned, Brandon Polinick. There's a lot of great anglers that are sharing a lot of percentages. Patrick Walters as well. And Jason Christie being the 4th highest selected angler in this bucket, I will take that every day, especially with the water temp we just heard.
Yeah, the last few days I've kind of shifted in saying that I think he's my pick to win the Classic. I just think that just like the Express Boats commercial on Bassmaster Live, he still has unfinished business. This is the unfinished business. Let's be honest. This is it. So I like that pick, but he was my solid secondary selection. But I'm going to go with Patrick Walters in A. I like the fact that, like Jamie mentioned, the spotted bass are going to be consistent, right? So I think that somebody like Patrick Walters, I think, will be able to catch a good limit early in the morning using, his forward-facing sonar. Obviously, a place that he's done well, a place that, he's fished a lot, obviously being a South Carolina native. And I want to say he was at 17.5% or so when I picked him. 17.9 is what it says right now. So, for him not to be the most selected angler in the bucket, I was all for that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that Brandon Cobb deserves the super high percentage, but I'm going to go with Patrick Walters in A.
That's a really good pick. I mean, obviously people are going to pick him because he's won here before. That was in the fall, a little bit different, but I do know Patrick knows this place pretty well. And, he is the low country of South Carolina. So over on the coast by the beach, by Santee Cooper, but he went to college in Columbia at South Carolina, where Lake Murray is, spotted bass, largemouth, blueback herring, those types of things. And so he's also fished Hartwell quite a bit. So that's a good pick. I also like his ability to adjust. At one point he's skipping a dock and he'll be looking at his graph forward facing. The next moment he'll be flipping a jig, and then he'll be deep and shallow. I like that. It's just hard to not get burned by making the wrong decision. It's like one of those tournaments. If you have one decision to make, you have to be right from the get-go. If you have 5 decisions to make for the tournament, you can make half of them right. And we're like, this guy's doing great. And then you make the wrong decision later in the game. So we will see if someone makes a bad decision early in the event or late in the event, but there will be a lot of decisions to make. So give me your bucket B pick while we're here.
Bucket B, I got Brandon Lester. Obviously off to a really good start this season. The Classic is so different in the sense that I wouldn't say you throw momentum and things of that nature out the window, but it's such a unique tournament in itself. And something that's crazy to me, you look at Brandon Lester, and I think most people still consider him, kind of a young gun of sorts, but you're talking about a guy that's fishing his 7th Classic. I mean, that's a lot in what seems like a really short amount of time. Like I said, I like the momentum factor. I like the fact that, once again, he's one of those guys that can do both. Really rock solid anywhere he goes. He's had mixed results on Hartwell, but I like Brandon Lester in B.
This is definitely a power fishing time for him, but man, he is such a good worm fisherman as well, whether it's with a spinning rod or a Carolina rig. Like, man, if they just said Lake Hartwell was in Anderson in Florida, he would be a guaranteed final day guy because his track record in Florida is so great. Coming off a win at the Open, a great finish at St. John's, and then a top 10 at the Harris Chain. Brandon Lester's a really good pick momentum wise. I know you didn't pick him for that reason, but man, it's if he doesn't win this one, boy, next year that he's already qualified for the Knoxville Classic could be one that he could knock out of the park too. I'm going to go with Gerald Swindle in bucket B. And that's why I asked that question to Jamie before we wrapped up. I wanted him to tell me, yes, Gerald Swindle's going to win this Classic because it's his style. He didn't quite give me that, but he did kind of perk up and he liked Swindle's chances. Of all the lakes in the Classic that we've had in the spring, this is by far his best result. The 2018 Classic is going to resemble the conditions better than any other Classic that we've had. You think about it. Let's just go back. 2016 Classic at Grand Lake. It was cold. And then it started getting warmer, but it was dirty. So it was behind it's behind in terms of transition than it is here. 2017 Conroe, that was basically like a summertime tournament in March. Then we have 2018 here. This is very similar, weather-wise that we're having. And then 2019 Knoxville, that place was 6 feet low, and then it was up in the streets of Knoxville in a week. So those fish were all kinds of crazy and changed up. And it's a river system compared to, I know the Savannah River is Lake Hartwell, but it is a impounded lake. And then you think about it. So that's 2019. 2020 Gunnersville, a lot of grass, a lot of different things going on there. 2021 Ray Roberts in the summer. So the only tangible results out of the last 7 classics that we think about conditions wise, it's this one. And he was in it to win it. If he didn't break down one of those days and lose a couple hours on a day that he was figuring it out, he could be a classic champion. So I think Gerald Swindle in bucket B, you got Stetson Blaylock at 20%, John Cox at 25%, Brandon Lester at 14%, Gerald Swindle under 10%. Man, I like the way the conditions are going for a guy like Swindle.
I'm with you on that. So give me your bucket C pick.
I went really low percentage with this one, and I went with the guy who loves a jig. He fishes around spotted bass continuously at home. But man, this could be one of those dirty water, up shallow, old school type tournaments. And I think that Matt Herron could be a really good pick in bucket C. So I'm going to lock in Matt Herron. He's sitting there in a bucket with Buddy Gross at 20%, John Cruz at 15, Drew Benton at 12, and Scott Martin at 25%. That's a really good bucket to maybe go low percentage if you want to. There's a couple other guys in there. This could be a Kyle Welcher deal. You've got a Wes Logan. This is Wes Logan and Matt Herron are basically the same person, just 20 years apart in age, I feel. But they're basically the same person because Wes is a little bit grumpy. I think Wes has gotten grumpier and Matt has gotten less grumpy over the last couple of years. So I like it, but I like Matt Herron here. And when it comes to percentages, we'll get into this more if we want to, but it's not like he's a better pick because he's a low percentage. But if I'm going to go with Jason Christie and Gerald Swindle and some guys that are going to be picked higher percentage, they're going to be fan favorites at times. I got to sneak in a guy who's going to be under the radar that if he does well, I can gain a bunch on those guys in the bucket. I could gain a bunch for a quarter of the people picking Scott Martin, for a fifth of the people picking Buddy Gross, and then 2 others over 12%. Like, you got what is that? 25, 45, and then you've got another 30%. You got 75% of the picks in 4 anglers. So the other 10 or the other 9 in that bucket, I mean, it gives you a good chance to make up some ground here. So I'm going Matt Herron, low percentage.
I am very, very upset with you because I also chose Matt Herron in C for the exact same reasons. That's why I was trying to tell you to stop, because I was going to go 3, 2, 1, and then say who we picked, because I knew right off the bat when you started explaining who it was, I picked him for the exact same reasons. Obviously, somebody that also has, a lot of classic experience. 10th classic. This one will be kind of the same thing you were talking about. Spotted bass are by no means a mystery to him. Obviously, fishes on the Coosa all the time. Granted, they set up far different. It's not even remotely the same, but I mean,
they're not
still
bait oriented, they're current oriented.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But no, I got really excited about this pick when Jamie started talking about fishing some of the docks, the flatter docks and things of that nature, because how many tournaments in Bassmaster history have we seen Matt Herron fish boat docks and do better fishing boat docks than everybody else doing other things? Like I think about a lot of the Tennessee River tournaments that get dominated offshore, and then there's Matt Herron flipping a jig on a dock and catching 6-pounders. It's like, to me, I could not believe that. I can understand why he would go under the radar a little bit, but at 1.2% or no 1.8%. I love Matt Herron in C. I hope that nobody else picks him because I am super confident in that pick in C.
And if they don't want to pick him, I mean, you've got a Steve Kennedy at 5. Lee Livesey is at 4% in this bucket. Wes Logan, same stylistically as a lot of those guys we just mentioned. You've got a Brian Schmidt coming off a good Florida swing. Kyle Welcher, 2%, had a terrible first 2 events, hoping a mindset change here, but this sets up for his style as well, especially covering water. If it is an offshore spotted bass deal, Chad Pipkins is a great pick as well. He's got good success here in April as well, even with a broken shoulder. He was able to make a top 10. So I'm glad we're on the same lines, but that leads me kind of into my bucket D, but I'm going to let you start off bucket D.
So bucket D, I also went super low percentage, 2 buckets in a row. He honestly, if I can double check this really fast, he is tied to be the lowest in the entire bucket. I'm going with Luke Palmer in bucket D. So this is not an exact science, right? But I looked back at the 2018 Classic. I love that Classic. I thought it was fantastic. And I watched it here recently, and I realized there was one consistent thing. Every Oklahoma angler in the Classic that year did extremely, extremely well. And I actually, just by all random odds, I ran into James Elam at the tackle store up the road the other day, and I was talking to him about that, and he kind of expressed the same exact feelings that, it just, you can find the backs of creeks and do what some of those Oklahoma anglers did in that 2018 Classic, and it just feels like home. And like I said, that's not an exact science by any means, but at 1.2%, we're also talking about a guy that's fished every Classic since he's been an Elite Series pro. So, I mean, somebody that's not a stranger to the Classic whatsoever. But yeah, at 1.2%, that's another one of those, picks that, like Ronnie was mentioning, I'm okay with going super low percentage because I like the gamble that it presents, that he might do better than all those other guys and you would make up a ton of points, and then it could go the other way and he could do awful and I look like an idiot. So it can go either way.
Hey, we're both idiots whether they do well or not, I promise. The only person who's touting that we're not idiots is ourselves, and so that's the deal. But I looked at it, there's quite a few anglers who have, I look at maybe their top 2 or 3 Classic finishes, especially our top 10 that we're gonna have on camera. I know the list already. We helped create that list, and we did it for various reasons for the show, but looking back and kind of establishing some stats for them that we can throw up, in the show, a lot of these anglers for this time of the year, their best Classic finishes have been Hartwell and Grand. And I was like, there's got to be some causation or correlation over here between Grand Lake and Lake Hartwell. Totally different in terms of how they maybe set up, but then there are river arms, there's arms that go off of it, there's creeks, backs of the creeks are always a big thing, but the bait's different, the species is different. I know largemouth are in Grand Lake, but they're just wired different. I mean, I guarantee you, if you put a largemouth in a like a fish tank by itself, it would try to like ram the glass because it's looking for blueback heron, it's trying to be aggressive. So it's just a little bit different, but it was weird how many anglers that we have had great finishes at those 2 bodies of water and haven't really had great finishes in Texas or other places. And so very, very interesting there. So I'll go with my bucket D pick. It's also a low percentage guy, same kind of mindset as my bucket C pick. And that is Josh Strassner. I'm going with Josh Strassner. The year he qualified, Kyle, I believe the year he qualified, he fished and did well at Cherokee for smallmouth. He fished and did well at Hartwell with spotted bass and largemouth and various other lakes as well. So I think that Josh Strassner is very comfortable fishing off the bank. He likes to be up in the dirt, but I feel like he's comfortable off the bank, and I feel like he knows what to look for. And I will say it's not a Lake Lanier. You can come here as a largemouth predominant. You've never caught a spotted bass in your life, and you can do well at Lake Hartwell. If you've never caught a spotted bass in your life and you go to Lake Lanier, you may not do well. It's a different type of spotted bass lake. So I will say that. So Josh Strassner is my bucket D pick, and for the very similar reasons, but bucket D is very top heavy. You got the Angler of the Year leader, David Mullins. We did not put him in bucket D for any reason related to this season, but rather maybe Classic experience, Classic finishes and results, and the style that should show up. But I will say David Mullins caught him really good at Lake Lanier one year, cranking a red crankbait around and finding those spots where they gang up. So we will see if that maybe plays for him. But also Brian New and Brandon Card really taking a large percentage of people here because there are some unknowns. I'm not going to say it sets up for Hunter Shryock style or Matt Robertson style. Caleb Summerall, Matty Wong, still pretty much an unknown after 2 Elite Series events. Josh Strassner, my pick. Luke Palmer, like you said, Nick LeBrun as well, and Ray Hanselman. We got a lot of anglers not from this region, so I understand why in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee guys are picked, even though Brandon Card's not from North Carolina. That's where he resides now. So I think that's going to be a little tricky bucket that we will see play out for fantasy fishing.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that exactly like you said, it's interesting to see how the percentages are spread out, and some of them, like you said, in bucket D, that I feel like was probably the most difficult bucket to pick from. We obviously set the buckets, and I still had a hard time figuring out who I wanted to go with. But I do like the Strassner pick. I also almost picked him for the same reason. I just wanted to get away from some of the higher percentages for the exact same reason that you mentioned with my bucket C and D pick. And it was between those two guys. But like I said, for some reason, there's something about that Oklahoma deal caught my eye. And I know Luke, like a lot of guys, got to go over in pre-practice, and
that's
whether or not that's
going to dang thing now.
Not that that's going to mean a lot, but I mean, somebody that's also spent a little bit of time in the lake never hurts. But anyways, get into your bucket E pick there, Ron.
Bucket E, we kind of hustled some fans in fantasy fishing because we stowed we stowed 4 Elite Series pros in bucket E because for the most part it's their first classic, and so they're basically brand new. They have qualified from the Elite Series, which may be a little bit more difficult than the Opens at times, but these guys they deserve to be here, and so they're in bucket E. And there's no shock that 83% of the pick share is through 4 Elite Series pros: Mark Frazier, Justin Hamner, KJ Queen, and Tyler Rivette. No shock here. But I'm going to go with an Opens guy. If there's one I picked an Opens guy last year, and he got 3rd. So, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about picking an Opens guy. And so if there's an Opens guy that's going to do well, I think it's Joey Nania. Joey Nania is in that same region as my last 2 picks. He's in Alabama. He loves spotted bass, but man, I think he won Pickwick with largemouth. He guides on spotted bass places. So he's got the best of both worlds in his back pocket. And so I think that Joey Nania, I think this classic is going to set up better for him than any other classic that we could ever have, other than maybe one on Logan Martin or Lay Lake.
Yeah, for sure. Now I see him out there on Lay Lake and Logan Martin all the time, and he is fantastic with his, forward-facing sonar and his electronics. So I like that pick. Definitely could be a player regardless, whether he's fishing for largemouth or spotted bass. I went with Justin Hamner in bucket E for a couple of reasons. So I like the way it sets up for him, no doubt. Obviously, really good with his forward-facing sonar. Another thing to keep an eye on, obviously, he runs with Patrick Walters on the Elite Series. So I think that definitely doesn't hurt in this classic. And then also in the 2020 Open, the same one that you had referenced earlier, he finished 22nd in that event. That would be the year that he qualified, of course. But yeah, I like Justin Hamner in E, and I was a little surprised that he was as low percentage as he is, 8.6%
of the 4 Elite Series pros for sure.
Yeah. I was a little surprised to see that, but I like Justin Hamner and E. Really good with the jerk bait. Definitely could be one of those guys that is able to get off to a consistent start in the morning and then, slide up there and, catch some big largemouth later in the day.
Yeah, especially he would be a higher pick if maybe there was still some dog fennel on Lake Hartwell. But like you said, Jamie mentioned, water's been higher. It didn't get down too far, too low. So it didn't get to grow up. So that'll change some picks. But yeah, you can definitely see a dirty, shallow water strategy with my picks, even though Joey Nania, maybe a Matt Herron and Josh Strassner will fish maybe a little bit more off. Gerald Swindle has the ability. He did that in 2018 as well. We'll see. I don't know if Jason Christie really owns a spinning rod, but I don't care. I didn't pick him for a spinning rod, so that's fine. But I did predict this tournament based off of the water temperature that I saw and heard about. So that's our Rapple of Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing teams. Now let's go to our Drain the Lake. Drain the Lake, if you don't know, if you're listening to the podcast for the first time and you've never played this portion of fantasy fishing, the deal is you pick 8 people for your team. But Kyle, once you pick one guy, once you pick them, you don't use them ever again. They're done for the year. So you got to be strategic and you got to be wise with it. And so do you mix in an opens angler or a guy that won't be on the elite roster the rest of the season so you don't have to use a spot up and you can save more elites later? That's a risk that you can take. Not many of the opens guys ever do well in the Classic. We did have one last year jump up and do it. So we will see about that. But yes, once you pick an angler, once you set that lineup, you cannot use that angler anymore this season. So I kind of had to look at my whole season my season as a whole and make my picks. So I'm going to give you 4 picks, and none of these should be surprising, but I've got Hank Cherry, Brandon Cobb, Matt Airy, and Jason Christie for 4 picks. And those guys are all 54, 28, 45, 38, all those high percentage guys, but I got to use them. I think it sets up better for them here than maybe other events will this season.
So my first 4 are identical to yours, except I have Brandon Cobb, Hank Cherry, Matt Airy, and Joey Nania. I did go Joey Nania on Drain the Lake, and I actually selected another non-elite series angler, but we'll get into that after your next 4.
So I'll say out of my 8, I handicapped myself a little bit. I hedged my bets a little bit because I did go 4 well-known power fishing guys that I expect to do well in this tournament: Hank Cherry, Brandon Cobb, Matt Airy, Jason Christie. But these next 4, I expect to maybe be the spotted bass consistent contingent for my team, and that is Jeff Gustafson, Taku Ito, Joey Nania, and a guy. So I did put Joey Nania on my team for both Drain the Lake and Rapala, but a guy that we haven't mentioned all show. I got Brandon Polinick on my team, and people want to save him for the St. Lawrence. I get it. Man, he could get triple points this week. He could win this Classic.
No, that's a solid point. I went super heavy on some of the guys you would like to save for later in the season too. Starting with Chris Zaldane. That's another one that, naturally I'd like to save for, maybe St. Lawrence or somewhere, later on in the season, Oahe. But I went Chris Zaldane, Justin Hamner. I doubled up on that. I went Shane LaHue, and then another Shane Powell. I got Shane Powell on my Drain the Lake. So, and I'll give Emily Hand a little bit of credit because her and I talked about this on Friday, I want to say, in the office. But who did Shane Powell fish with in college?
He fished with the Lee brothers, but his last year he fished with Jordan. He missed out on people don't know that he could have been in a Bassmaster Classic if he beat Jordan Lee, his teammate.
So naturally, I think there's got to be some stylistic comparisons there. I definitely think, you go into this as Shane Powell, it seems like you have literally nothing to lose. That sounds crazy,
no.
but I mean,
check, yeah.
This is the first time we've mentioned him this entire podcast, and you and I both know who he is good and dang well. But I like the prospect of saving another angler, and I actually really like his chances to do well. So kind of a double whammy for him on Drain the Lake.
He is just like Jordan Wiggins, in my opinion, a very well-rounded, seasoned angler locally in the state of Alabama, but has roots that go much deeper than the state of Alabama when it comes to bass fishing. And so we saw Jordan Wiggins do very well day 1 at Ray Roberts, but Ray Roberts was a little bit tough and volatile and didn't do well on day 2. So Shane Powell could do the same thing. He could maybe put it together consistently. I will say it's going to be very hard for guys to not catch a limit. I expect people to miss the cut with 10 bass. And then I expect everyone on the final day to catch 15 bass total, so that shouldn't be a problem. But I like your picks. I like that you saved 2, but I do think it's because you went a little heavy earlier in the season on different things. So I'll throw out maybe 2 or 3 options that if you didn't like our picks, to consider possibly. I think of Brock Mosley. It could be his time. We say that a lot about a lot of guys. It could be Lake Oahe, and people will say it's their time, and they've never been there. Like, we could say that, but I think that this is momentum building. He had a tough Florida time. He knows his decision making there, what needs to get better, and whatnot. But this does set up well as a solid lake for him, possibly, especially with the shallow aspect. I think also an Austin Felix is a sneaky pick for his percentage, but I'm saving Austin for later. And I think one of the Johnston boys will do well. It's hard to tell which one, and you don't want to waste them if they don't do well or you pick the wrong one. You want to save them for a guaranteed, maybe like the St. Lawrence River. But I will say one of the Johnstons I expect to be maybe with a camera in their boat on the final day.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good possibility. I mean, when you go through the Drain the Lake, It's obviously you naturally get very tempted to start just clicking through some guys, but it definitely takes a little bit of willpower to save some guys. And obviously when you're talking about getting double points and triple points, obviously for the classic winner, you really want to go with the guys who you think can win this tournament. And you and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but when you're selecting your Drain the Lake roster, you really, really want to think about who can win this tournament. And then if you look at an angler and you like him for a certain tournament, but then you look at a tournament later on in the year and you think that's his best chance to win him, or, win this year, save him. So it definitely takes some willpower, I guess, to save some picks. But I think you and I both went pretty heavy on the classic. But like I said, when triple points are available, you definitely want to try to pick the winner for the classic.
I had 4 of my 8 picks for the Harris chain. The Harris chain was my redemption. Like, just there was no wind beneath my wings at the first event, but I had all that wind at the Harris chain, and I had the 20th best team going into the final day at Harris chain in Drain the Lake, 20th in the world. But I had 4 fishing on the final day. None of them won. I got second, I got third, I got 7th, and I got 8th. And when I didn't pick the winner, I lost 300 spots in Drain the Lake, because it's so important to pick the winner. So if you can pick the winner in a regular season elite event and get 600 points for doing so, 300 times 2. When you do the classic, somebody's going to get 900 points for picking the winner. And like a dummy, I didn't pick Hank Cherry last year, and that would have been one of the events I did. But that he makes hay. But I will say that picking the winner is very, very difficult to do. But man, when you do, you can jump up the standings. I had people who had terrible teams, guys in the 80s, and they picked the winner. That's adding a 9th or 10th person to your team.
Yeah, no, that makes a huge, huge difference, especially for the classic being triple points. It's very, very easy to jump way up or go way down if you don't pick the winner.
Exactly. Well, hey, Kyle, this has gone on really long, one of our longest, but I feel like it was one of our best podcasts as well, based on the content that Jamie gave us for the goods for Lake Hartwell. Very excited about that preview. So make sure you join us all week long. The festivities will be going on. Kyle's going to come up on Tuesday, like we mentioned. You're going to have the registration aspect. We'll be able to talk to our anglers really for the first time. We'll have our TV interviews that morning, that will run, obviously, and get those sound bites for live later. Wednesday is official practice day where we ride out. I'll be riding with Jason Christie. So I'll tell you if I'm going to switch him from my team. If he's not on anything, if he can't catch a spotted bass, he's out. Possibly, but I'll be riding with Christy. You'll be out there taking photos. We'll have Thursday media day. If you're looking to attend the classic in Greenville, it's only about an hour for the takeoff and the weigh-in. Make sure you try to go east though, and don't try to cross the bridge on Hartwell, because all kinds of backups can happen there. Try to come from the east if you can, but go to the takeoffs, experience a Lake Hartwell Bassmaster Classic takeoff. You won't dread that. That'll be a great experience. And then also come by the expo. We'll have the Bassmaster Live booth set up, all of the exhibits and whatnot. The weigh-in should be great as well. It's going to be a great week. I'm excited for Classic Week. I'm very, very tired, Kyle, but I'm very excited for Classic Week.
Yeah, I'm tired as well. I haven't even made it to South Carolina yet, and I'm already pretty tired. But no, like you mentioned, if you have the opportunity to go to the Bassmaster Classic, I know Ronnie would echo the same thing. Definitely do it. It is an atmosphere that is unmatched across definitely all of bass fishing. I think that's easy to say. Really, with any sports, I mean, it is a phenomenal atmosphere. The expo is fantastic. If you're a bass fisherman, that is the best 3 days you can possibly be in one area to buy tackle, to see new things, to see boats. I mean, it really is the place to be. And it's a special moment, that final day, when somebody gets to hold the classic trophy over their head. So if you have an opportunity to go, definitely do it. I went, several times as a fan, and even working it now, I've said this jokingly, it's not nearly as fun as just getting to go as a fan, because you get to take in a lot of different aspects and everything. But no, I cannot stress that to you enough. Definitely go if you get the chance. It is a blast.
Yeah, I will say that every event on the Elite Series, when we see the winner, most tournaments in bass fishing, But when someone steps out of their boat onto the stage, there's a guy sitting in the hot seat waiting for them. They've got their 5 fish and they put it on the scales right beside that guy. And Lisa Talmadge is weighing them in. Dave Mercer is doing his thing on the mic. And the whole arena, it's like they suck the oxygen out. Everyone knows this is the moment. Someone's about to win $300,000. Someone's about to be a Bassmaster Classic champion. I can't imagine if a Hank Cherry, what he'd experienced doing it 3 times in a row. I can't imagine that. But we know there's a great opportunity for someone to win their first Classic this year as well. And there's a lot of guys who are big names in the sport. This is the one tournament they need to check off. So I will say, I can't wait to have my spine get those chill bumps right up and down it, that nothing else can really resemble that, other than maybe in a few weeks when my first child is born. I might get that same kind of emotion. But I will say Bassmaster Classic is one thing I'll never forget as a kid. And now they pay me to be here and to do this. So it's a pretty good gig, Kyle.
Yeah. And what I said earlier, don't take that the wrong way. It is still an absolute blast to be an employee and get to experience it from the other aspect. But like I said, getting to
no
go
one's going to stop you because you have your badge. You can walk anywhere.
Right. Yeah. So, but getting to go as a kid and everything, it really is a blast. And, if you have the opportunity to take your child or, your fishing buddy or whoever to the Classic, definitely do it. It is a really, really good time.
Awesome, Kyle. Well, hey, wrapping up this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. We really enjoyed it. We love the sport of bass fishing, man. We love Bassmaster. We love these anglers. And so we get so excited talking about it because this is a dream come true for us, but also we know what it means to them. So, Kyle, I'm going to go grab something to eat because I just got to South Carolina and knocked out this podcast. And you be safe getting here, and I'll see you in a few days.
Sounds good, man. We'll see you.